Chapter 15. Cup of Josie's was 7 blocks west and 1 block north from the park. One might think Josie could manage to travel 8 blocks without getting a ticket, but the red and blue lights in her rearview mirror told her otherwise. "I'm being pulled over." "What did you do?" Thomas asked. "No idea." She was tempted to wait for the intersection so she could get off Main Street, but there were spaces in front of the library, and she didn't figure the cop would take kindly to her ignoring them. The police cruiser stopped behind her. The bodyguards parked behind them. Josie watched in the rearview mirror as the bodyguards stepped out of their SUV and walked forward, prompting the cops to jump from the cruiser. Josie rolled down her window, but she couldn't hear the conversation, though she could see it was heated. She started to open her door, but Thomas gripped her arm. "Just stay in the car." "But maybe I should—" "Just stay in the car." Thomas's smile had been replaced by a tight expression, and worry lines fanned from his eyes. "Do you know what's going on?" "No idea. If it's nothing, then it's nothing. If it's something, you're better off not making them think you're a danger." "A danger? What in the world?" She found her driver's license, car registration, and proof of insurance. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been pulled over and had no idea what the police officer would ask for. Her heart thumped, but she had no reason to worry. She hadn't done anything wrong. Had she not come to a complete stop at the sign? Had she forgotten to use her blinker? Passers-by were watching the scene unfold. Josie'd stopped within full view of the 2 restaurants on Main Street, and her car, a Cadillac she'd bought when she still lived in D.C., didn't exactly blend in. One of the cops approached her window. She recognized him as a regular customer at the café. His normally friendly manner was missing. "Could you step out of the car, please?" Step out? Did cops usually ask people to step out for minor traffic violations? Were they mad about the bodyguards? No, that didn't make sense. Thomas leaned across her. "Hey, Rich, looks like you recovered." The cop, who seemed a little younger than herself, looked confused. "It was a stomach bug, right?" Thomas asked. "Zach responded to Josie's call Monday, but you weren't there. Said you were sick." "Right. Yeah, I'm fine." "What's going on?" "Step out of the car, please." He focused on Josie. "Both of you." She left her documents on the center console and did as he asked. The officer she'd met Monday, Zach Tyler, directed them to sit on the sidewalk, a grim expression on his face. Lake and Donnelly took up position behind them, but Josie feared the bodyguards couldn't protect her from whatever this was. "I don't understand," Josie said to Officer Tyler. "I wasn't speeding. I don't think I broke any laws." Tyler said nothing. Beside her, Thomas muttered, "I don't have a good feeling about this." "You know these guys. They're your friends." "Doing?" He shook his head and pressed his lips closed, telling her to do the same. Another cruiser pulled up. While Officer Tyler watched over them, 3 cops searched her car. She felt sick to her stomach as she watched. This was the first day she'd driven it since the alarm went off on Monday. Had the assailants done more than just set it off? Had they broken in? The new cops searched the front and back seats. Rich dug in her trunk and came out with a little baggie filled with— oh no. She didn't know what those pills were, but she had a few guesses. Thomas lurched to his feet. Her car was broken into a few nights ago. Somebody must have planted that. "Sit down," Zach Tyler said. Thomas sat again. He shot her a wide-eyed look of fear. This was bad, very bad. When the search was complete, Officer Tyler said, "On your feet, Ms. Smith." While she stood, the police officer addressed Thomas. "I could take you in, but I've known you a long time, and I don't think you had anything to do with this." "She doesn't have anything to do with this," Thomas said. "Her car was—" "I was there," Officer Tyler said. "I know what happened." Thomas turned to her. "Don't say anything. I know you did nothing wrong, but there's something going on. Just wait until you get a lawyer, okay?" Josie nodded, but the idea that she might talk to them— what could she say? She had no words. "Who should I call?" Thomas asked. She could barely focus. The police officer was watching her. "Josie," Thomas said. "Who should I call?" The question registered. Bentley, call Bentley. Tyler stepped behind her and took one of her arms. Cold steel wrapped around her wrist. Sorry, ma'am. Officer Tyler said the words quietly, only loudly enough for her to hear. We got a tip, and we had no choice but to follow it. His voice was louder when he continued. You have the right to remain silent.
Chapter 16. Thomas stood beside the bodyguards and watched as the cruiser pulled away from the curb, Josie in the back seat, handcuffed in the back seat. Then he turned to Lake. I need a ride. Let's go. The three of them jogged to the SUV. The group was silent for the short drive to Bentley's hotel. Lake had barely shifted into park when Thomas hopped out. He didn't have Bentley's phone number. If the man wasn't here, then Thomas would have to call Carlisle, who'd sent his number and the senators after Thomas had agreed to help protect Josie. He approached the front desk. An older man with gray hair stood on the opposite side. Thomas flipped through his memory bank, remembered being introduced to the guy once at the Patriot. Bob, right? The clerk nodded. Have we met? James Sullivan introduced us. He forced his tone to remain cordial, while his insides thrummed with tension. Could you call Bentley Kent's room and tell him Thomas Windham is here to see him? He never assumed that people remembered his name. He'd found most didn't. Tell him it's an emergency. Bob punched in the number. It was a long, torturous moment before the clerk relayed the message. Thank God Bentley was there. Bob hung up. He'll be right down. He'd barely finished speaking when feet pounded on the staircase behind him. This wasn't an overlarge hotel, just 3 stories, 6 rooms on each. There was an elevator, but he doubted it could be faster than running. Bentley was definitely running. He pushed through the doorway. What happened? Come on. Thomas marched outside. No need to have this conversation in front of Bob. Bentley followed, and they both climbed into the back of the waiting SUV. As soon as the door slammed, Bentley said, Where's Josie? She was arrested for drug possession 10 minutes ago. What? How could you let this happen? Thomas resisted the urge to punch the guy. What should I have done? Beat up the cops and told her to run? Bentley took a deep breath. Right. Okay. He snatched his phone from his pocket and dialed. A tinny voice came faintly through the phone. Bentley said, I need to speak with Carlisle. Now. He glanced at the cell's screen. Crap, it's the senator. To Thomas, he said, You have his number. Call him. Thomas did, and a moment later he heard, Senator Harrington. Senator, this is Thomas Windham. Josie was arrested. I know. I just got the pictures. Tapped Bentley's shoulder to get the man's attention. Speaking to the senator, Pictures? Bentley's eyes closed, and he dropped his head against the headrest. I'm trying to reach Bentley, the senator said. He's here. He's on the phone with Carlisle. Okay, good. Tell me what happened. Thomas climbed out of the car, looking around to ensure nobody was nearby, and relayed the events. The drugs were planted, of course, the senator said. Monday night, when her car alarm went off, Thomas guessed. We assumed they set off the alarm just to get her outside. But obviously, he could kick himself for not investigating. Stupid. He'd been so caught up in his work, in himself, and someone he cared about had paid the price. Again. I'm sure Carlisle's already securing her an attorney. The senator, so confident when they'd spoken Tuesday, sounded shaken. These charges won't stick, but this wasn't about the charges. It's about the scandal. What do you mean? You said something about pictures? I got them a few minutes ago. Someone photographed the whole thing. You two sitting on the sidewalk. The cops standing over you. The bodyguards. And then Josie being handcuffed. Did they come from the same number as Monday's photos? No, but that's not surprising. Whoever this is doesn't want to be found out. Tell me the angle. Where were they taken from? Looks like. There was a pause. The person was standing across the street and down a little. Would have been to your left. Send them to me, would you? Sure. Thomas waited until they came through and studied them. He pictured where they'd been, where the photographer must have been standing, in front of the little souvenir shop beside the Patriot. He remembered the people who'd been there. There were a few he'd met, but most were strangers. Tourists, he guessed, based on their attire. But there'd been one guy, slender, over 6 feet, wearing a red baseball hat, phone up and aimed. I think it was one of the guys from Monday night, the tall one. What did he look like? The senator sounded optimistic for the first time in their conversation. I didn't see his face. He wore a cap low, and we were a considerable distance away, and his phone blocked my view. If only Thomas had noticed the man's presence. He'd been so focused on the cops and Josie that he hadn't thought to look at bystanders. Again, stupid on his part. I'll ask the bodyguards, Thomas said. Maybe one of them got a better look. Good thinking, the senator said. This is another intimidation tactic. The man's words came slowly, accentuating his southern accent. They want me to vote for the bill, and they're telling me they'll stoop to any level to get it done. We can hire her bodyguards, but Josie still won't be safe. They can get to her, they can ruin her, and they can get to me through her. They think, accurately, that I'll do just about anything to protect my daughter. As frustrating as this situation was, there hadn't been that many pills in the little bag. If that was all the police had found, then she'd be charged with possession. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't intent to distribute either. The people behind this, whoever they were, could have done more damage if they'd wanted to. So this was a warning shot. Sir, Thomas said, are you saying you're considering supporting the bill? Thomas had no right to ask the question, but he couldn't help his curiosity. No, it was more than curiosity. As much as Thomas wanted Josie to be safe, he didn't relish the idea of this upstanding senator voting in favor of something he disagreed with so vehemently. Something that would use Thomas's tax dollars and everybody else's to fund more abortions. It was one thing to have abortion be legal. He hated that, but its existence wasn't on the table. It was an entirely different thing to force people who were morally opposed to the practice to pay for it, and to line the pockets of a bunch of bigwigs who didn't give a rat's behind about the people whose lives would be altered or destroyed as a result of their policies. Supporting the bill? The senator's voice sounded strong as he repeated Thomas's question. If I have to send Josie somewhere safe for the duration, then I will. But I cannot. I will not support a bill that throws hundreds of millions of dollars toward abortion. I think Josie understands that. As do I, Thomas said. There are things worth fighting for. That's the truth. Thing is, I knew when I ran for office that I'd be putting myself in a lot of battles. It never occurred to me I'd be tossing my daughter in the ring. It'd be one thing if the foe would attack head on. She's strong. She can handle it. But even as Thomas said the words, he worried. When this tactic didn't work, what would their enemies try next? Behind him, the car door slammed, and Bentley rounded the car, hand outstretched. Let me talk to him. Thomas didn't appreciate the order, but said, Bentley would like to speak with you. Good, put him on. Thomas handed the man his phone, but stayed close to listen. Carlisle hired a local attorney, Bentley said. He's on his way to the station, and he's working on getting the number for the county prosecutor. Thomas said, I can get you her number. Bentley's gaze snapped to him. Hold on, Senator. He held a hand over the phone's mic. You know the county prosecutor? She's an old friend of the family, but I'll need my phone. Bentley lifted the phone again. Senator, Thomas believes he can reach the prosecutor. We'll get back to you when we know more. Bentley ended the call and returned Thomas's phone. Thomas texted his mother. Got an emergency. Needs Sheila Robichaux's number ASAP. Why? He didn't feel free to explain the situation to her, so he just said, please? A moment later, the contact information came through. He thanked his mother, then tapped the contact and showed it to Bentley. Text that to Carlisle. You have his? Yeah. Thomas forwarded the prosecutor's number to Carlisle. Then he dialed it himself. 3 rings later, the line connected. Sheila Robichaux. Ms. Robichaux, this is Thomas Windham. You're not a kid anymore. When are you going to start calling me Sheila? Old habits die hard. What can I do for you? Her tone was friendly and accommodating. He hoped it would stay that way. I need your help. On Monday night, he told the prosecutor the basic facts of the situation without sharing who Josie's father was. She listened, added nothing, until he ended with, She's been arrested. You're saying you think somebody planted the drugs? She asked. I'm certain of it. I know this woman personally. You probably know her too. She owns Cup of Josie's. I know her face, but lots of people use drugs. Not Josie. Somebody tipped the police off. If those were her drugs, how would that somebody have known they were in her car? An ex-friend with an axe to grind? In this case, there's more going on than meets the eye. What does that mean? How much should he tell her? Could we meet? I have a date. Thomas didn't say anything, just waited. She sighed audibly into the phone. Where are you now? I'm headed to my office. He met Bentley's eyes and the man nodded. I'll be there in 2 minutes. On High Street, right? Right next door to Cuppa. I'll be there in 10. After Thomas ended the call, Bentley said, Well? She's on her way. We probably ought to call the attorney. As they climbed back into the bodyguard's SUV, the two had stood awkwardly beside them, as if unsure what to do without anyone to guard. He directed them to his insurance agency just down the block. With any luck, they'd have this managed and Josie out of jail in a couple of hours. If the police decided to hold her, she'd be stuck in jail until she could be arraigned in 2 days.
Chapter 17. At least Josie was the only person in the holding cell that evening. Coventry was a small enough town that she figured the jail was empty most of the time. There was a bed and a thin mattress, and though they looked clean, she was too hyped up to sit, furious. They'd gone too far. Whoever'd done this, they weren't fooling around. Well, they'd taken on the wrong target this time. She knew all the tricks in the book. She'd played more than her share. When she figured out who'd framed her, she'd make them pay. Really? Ugh. It was either her conscience or him. She sighed and sat on the side of the bed. What do you expect me to do? There was no answer, which didn't surprise her. She was on the right side of this battle. She was supporting her father, who was standing up against a terrible bill. She wasn't going to let them win. If that meant she had to get down in the dirt to fight them, well, she'd gotten dirty before. Dirt washed off. Does it? That voice again. It was accurate, unfortunately. The last time she'd played dirty, things had gotten out of hand. There was a reason Josie'd left Washington and vowed to never go back. Though her sins had not been exposed, she knew what she'd done. God knew. And yes, the dirt washed off, but not because of Josie's actions. Her sins had been washed away by the blood of Christ. She knew that. She did. She just wasn't sure how that knowledge should inform what she had to do next. The uniformed officer who'd locked her into the cell returned through the heavy door. "Let's go," he said. "Where am I going?" He didn't bother to answer. Josie followed the man into a small room, where her belongings were returned to her. Then she was led to another door. The police officer opened it, and she stepped. Outside, Bentley, Thomas, and a woman she'd never met were standing beside the bodyguard's SUV. Before she could process that, Lake and Donnelly took positions on either side of her. "To the car, ma'am," Lake said. As she walked, her gaze locked with Thomas's. "What happened?" "Ms. Smith?" The woman beside him held out her hand. "Sheila Robicheau. I'm the county prosecutor." Josie shook her hand. "Can you explain what's going on?" Her father must have pulled serious strings to get Josie out so quickly. "Thomas is a friend of the family," the prosecutor said. "Thomas? Not her father?" Ms. Robicheau continued. "He told me about the incident Monday night. Based on the fact that you have no criminal record and your car was broken into, our office decided not to pursue charges." The weight of uncertainty lifted and floated away. Unfortunately, the trauma and the anxiety wouldn't dissipate so easily. "Thank you." "I do wonder, though." The prosecutor's gaze flicked to the bodyguards, then to the men at her side. "There's obviously more to this than a prank. What's going on?" Josie started to answer. "It's sort of a—" "This isn't the time," Bentley said. Lake's voice overshadowed them both. "We need to get you someplace safe." "My office?" Thomas suggested. She'd never been inside his office, but it seemed a better idea than the café, which would still be filled with dinner guests at that hour. Anxiety had kept her hunger at bay in the jail, but it was roaring back now. The lunch she and Shelley had shared in Plymouth had long since burned up. Shelley. Josie'd promised to meet her back at the apartment. Her friend was probably frantic. "Ma'am," Lake said. "In the car, please. Now." 5 minutes later, Josie stepped into Thomas's insurance agency. Like her café, this had been an old house. Except for a glass front door and the prominent sign over it, it still looked like a house, but the inside had been completely remodeled. Beyond a reception area, offices lined both sides of the building. With the refinished hardwood floor, white woodwork, freshly painted walls, and tasteful artwork, it felt both luxurious and cozy. She'd assumed his business was successful. This office told her that her assumption had been spot on. She could imagine what the place would be like when his employees filled all the offices, the phones ringing, customers coming and going. Impressive. But it was 8:15 on a Saturday night, and the offices were empty. Thomas led the way to a conference room, probably once a dining room, which she guessed because the layout was similar to what her buildings had originally been. She was just settling in a chair when somebody pounded on the front door. On the way, Josie had called Shelley, who had indeed been worried. Josie popped up. "I'll let her in." The look Donley gave her had her sinking to her seat. "Better yet, why don't you?" Without comment, he stepped out. A moment later, Shelley burst into the room. "Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!" She yanked Josie to her feet and hugged her. "Are you okay? I was so worried. I called your phone about 1,000,000 times, but you never picked up." "It couldn't be helped." Josie caught her friend up on what had happened, which only heightened Shelley's anxiety. "You were arrested. What the—" "It's okay. I'm okay." On the far side of the long table, Bentley said, "We don't have time for your drama, Shelley. Either sit down and be quiet or leave." "Bentley!" Josie shot him what she hoped was a scathing look. "Knock it off!" Then she caught the smug look Shelley sent him. They were both ridiculous. "I ordered dinner for everybody," Josie said. "If you don't want to sit in on the meeting, you could walk next door and pick it up for us." Shelley pulled out one of the rolling upholstered chairs and sat. "I'll stay. Maybe Bentley can get it." Josie resumed her seat, closing her eyes to pray for patience. She didn't have the energy for their bickering. Thomas's hand slid over hers on the table. The look he gave her, eyebrows up, chin lowered, communicated his question. "You okay?" She nodded, thankful for his gentle presence at her side. Sheila Robichaux sat at the end of the table. "My date is waiting for me. I'd like to know what's going on here." The woman had to be in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, so the word date surprised Josie, but not everybody was married and settled. Bentley swiveled to her. "Can we trust you to keep this confidential?" "I have been known to keep my share of secrets," Ms. Robichaux said. "Just keep my position in mind." The woman's loyalty lay with her employer, the county. But Josie had nothing to fear there. She'd broken no laws. Bentley looked at Josie, who decided that this woman, this friend of Thomas's, could be trusted. "My father is Senator Davis Harrington." The woman's eyebrows rose to her hairline. "Oh, oh, he's in the fight of his life right now." "Oh, good." She knew. "That's what this is about," Josie said. "Whatever side you stand on, he should have the right to vote his conscience. Somebody's trying to compel him to support the bill, and they're using me to do it. Thomas told you what happened Monday night, right?" She nodded. "Both times, my father's gotten photographs almost immediately." "You're being threatened," the prosecutor said. "Not bodily." Over the prosecutor's head, Lake's eyes tightened around the corners. She clearly didn't care for the distinction. Bentley said, "They framed you, Josie." "I know that. I'm just saying. If I hadn't gotten to you the other night." Thomas's pause was just long enough for her to jump in. "I'm just saying that so far." She met Bentley's eyes. "It's mostly intimidation tactics." She turned to Thomas. "Though we have no idea what they would have done if you hadn't shown up." The prosecutor was nodding. "And you don't know who these people are?" Josie recognized the expression on Bentley's face. He didn't want her to say. She tended to agree. "We have theories, but nothing concrete." Ms. Robichaux faced Thomas. And how are you connected to all of this? I'm a friend, he said. I'm helping to keep Josie safe, and she's helping me with my campaign. The thing is, the prosecutor scanned the people. You're trusting me with your stuff, so I'm going to trust you with this. It can't leave the room. At nods all around, the prosecutor turned back to Thomas. You need to win this race. Farley isn't to be trusted. In fact, one of the reasons I moved so fast is because I assumed that whatever was going on with your friend was related to you. Me? Thomas looked stunned. I wouldn't put it past him to use your girlfriend to make you look bad. She's not his girlfriend, Bentley growled. Thomas's gaze flicked to Josie, probably waiting for her to agree with Bentley. Josie didn't bother, because it didn't matter. What mattered was what she was saying. You think he should distance himself from me, she clarified. Ms. Robichaux nodded. If you're mired in scandal, he will be too. Can you help on his campaign in the background, in a less public role than what you guys did at the park today? Absolutely. Thomas spoke to the older woman. How did you know? It was all over social media, Ms. Robichaux said, and Josie's face was in more than one of the photos. And then her face was all over social media because she was arrested in front of the whole town. Your association with her has already hurt you. He sat back, mouth half open. I'm so sorry, Josie said. It never occurred to me this could come back on you. To the prosecutor, she said, I'll keep my distance. I can still help on the campaign. Thomas'll just have to stay away from me. Forget it. He swiveled to face her. I promised to protect you. I have Lake and Donley and Bentley. You can't risk your candidacy. Your safety is more important. Thomas stared at her, hard, as if trying to read something behind her eyes. She guessed what he was looking for, some indication she wanted him to leave. Or maybe the opposite, that she didn't. Truth was, the idea of keeping her distance from Thomas was about as comfortable as that jail cell had been. She'd come to depend on him. She enjoyed his company. She wanted him nearby. But she wouldn't be the reason he lost this race. She hardened her expression. I don't need you. He hardened his as well. I made a promise to your father. Whether you want me around or not, I'm not going anywhere. He turned back to Ms. Robichaux. I'm going to do the right thing, which means standing by my friend, and I'm going to trust God with the results. If I'm supposed to win this race, then I will. If I lose, then I'll trust God's sovereignty in that as well. His words pricked at the deep places in Josie's heart. She wanted to have that depth of faith. At the same time, she wondered, was Thomas being very wise or very stupid? After the prosecutor left, Josie called the café and asked her employee to deliver their dinners. He did right away, and they ate at the conference table. Lake sat at the far end of the conference table to scarf down a salad and sandwich, while Donley stood watch near the door. Thomas shoved his paper plate away and took out his phone. When Josie glanced that way, she caught the image of herself and him on the sidewalk. Those were sent to Dad? He leaned closer. Your father forwarded them to me. He flipped through the photos, which captured the events from the time they were pulled over until the cruiser turned the corner, Josie visible in the rear window. Thomas asked, You didn't happen to notice anyone across the street, did you? I was focused on the guys searching my car. Did you see someone? Thomas described a man who sounded a lot like the taller of the two, who'd threatened her Monday. Did you see his face? She asked. Wish I had. His cap shaded it. Feeling far too comfortable so close to Thomas, Josie turned away and caught sight of Shelley beaming. Despite all the craziness of that afternoon, it was clear Shelley's mind was on romance, and she approved of Thomas. Across the table, Bentley was watching too, an entirely different expression on his face. His eyes were narrowed, his lips pressed closed. His Adam's apple bobbed. Thomas walked to the end of the table and bent to show the photos to Lake. See the angle? The guy was probably standing in front of the souvenir shop by the restaurant. Any chance you saw him? Lake wiped her mouth with a napkin. 6'1", probably 190. Wore blue jeans and a gray t-shirt. Red cap and sneakers. I took him for a tourist. He was taking pictures, but so were a lot of people. You didn't happen to notice where he went? Sorry, no. Too bad you weren't paying attention, Thomas. Bentley barely spared him a glance as he tossed out the words. You'd seen the guy before. If only it had occurred to you to keep your eyes open. Gosh, if only you'd been there, Beta. I'm sure you'd have handled it so much better. Thomas stood up behind Lake. But you decided protecting Josie was less important than your afternoon nap. I was working, and my name is Bentley. You'd think in your business you'd have learned to remember people's names. Do you two mind? Josie said. Thomas's whole Beta thing was getting on her nerves. He shot her an apologetic look that she didn't believe for a second. Bentley didn't even bother with that. Thomas started toward Donley, who spoke before he crossed the room. I saw the guy. The bodyguard focused on Josie. After you were taken in, the man walked to the next block. He had blonde hair sticking out the back of his cap. I think he climbed into a white hatchback. Wow, she said. I'm impressed. The nearly silent bodyguard just nodded. Josie knew very little about the people who'd been hired to protect her. Quiet and serious as they were, the more she knew them, the more she trusted them. Not exactly a typical villain car, Bentley said. What kind of man drives a hatchback? Fathers, Thomas suggested. Guys who need to haul sporting equipment or tools. People who are environmentally conscientious and don't want to drive gas-guzzling SUVs, but need cargo space. Yes, I'm sure that's it. Bentley's voice was laced with sarcasm. An environmentally conscious goon. He probably plays polo on the weekends. Those polo mallets can be unruly. Thanks for your input, man. Really helpful. Shelley giggled. This is fun. By the irritation on Donley's face, he disagreed entirely. Josie was with the bodyguard. One assumes, Donley said, that he's been watching, waiting for you to drive your car so he could alert the police. The tip. Josie ignored the other two men in the room. Did anybody see him at the park? Donley asked. Josie hadn't, and she doubted Thomas had found a moment to notice anyone but the people crowded around him. But Shelley. Her friend's smile faded. Actually, you say he wore a red cap? She was focused on Lake. Sort of dark red? At Lake's nod, Shelley closed her eyes. Yeah, I saw him. He was on the edge of the beach, sitting on a picnic table. Thomas's head tipped to one side. The beach is a good 150 yards from where we were standing. Josie said, Shelley has remarkable senses. Okay. Thomas sounded skeptical. But I mean, the human eye can only see so far. Shelley said, There's a dead fly on the floor in the second office on the right, against the wall beside a paper shredder. You can't be serious. She gave him an unmistakable try-me look. Thomas disappeared out the door. The group waited in silence until he returned a moment later, smiling. Wow. I can't decide if I'd like to have your senses or not. Do you see every speck of dust? Unfortunately, it's a curse more than a blessing. Shelley turned to Josie. The guy was just sitting there. I noticed him toward the end of our session. He might have been there longer. Her shoulders lifted and dropped. My focus was elsewhere. Was he watching Ms. Smith? Lake asked. Shelley shook her head. Not that I noticed. Even if he had been, we were making a scene. Lots of people were watching. We were pretty far away, though. He couldn't have seen much. Lake stood and threw her trash in the can by the door. She took up Donley's position, and he grabbed a sandwich and settled in her seat. They were like a well-oiled machine, these two. Donley unwrapped his sandwich. So either he'd been watching you all along, just waiting for you to drive your car, or he had a way of knowing when you were driving it. Meaning? Bentley asked. I wonder if there's a tracker on it. Josie leaned back in her chair. This got more fun all the time. We'll check it out, ma'am, Donley said. I assume it's been impounded? Oh. She hadn't thought once about her car. She looked at Thomas. That's what Zach told me, he said. Shelley cleared her throat. You'll need to call the station. They'll tell you where it is. Why am I not surprised you know that? Bentley said. Listen, you little... Please, you two. Josie breathed through her exasperation. Give it a rest, okay? Sorry, Shelley, I didn't mean anything by it. Bentley tossed out the casual reply. No worries, she answered, just as breezily. I would expect nothing less. At that, Bentley actually smiled. Josie'd forgotten how much they despised each other. Maybe she'd blocked it out, like one might a trauma. Selective amnesia. Ma'am, Lake said, this was why we cautioned you against today's events. You were in a public place surrounded by unknown elements. Anything could have happened. I'd say you got off pretty easy. Easy? Bentley faced the woman standing against the wall. She was arrested. She wasn't shot. She wasn't kidnapped. She wasn't harmed. The woman's gaze landed on Josie. Next time, you might not be so lucky. Those words hung in the room, oppressive in their accuracy. Have you two nailed down any more information about who's behind all this? Thomas glanced at Bentley, but focused on Josie. Bentley fielded it. Based on what we know about him, his gaze flicked to Josie's, and she nodded for him to continue. We presume Jude Mitchell. Why? Thomas asked. When Bentley's eyes flashed, Thomas lifted his hands in a gesture of surrender. Not saying you're wrong, just wondering what led you to the conclusion. His expression softened infinitesimally. Josie and I had a situation with him in the past. He didn't come out of that well. That clears it up. Thanks, man. Thomas turned to her. Anything to add? She couldn't blame Thomas for his irritation. He wanted to know what they were up against. It wasn't his fault that she and Bentley didn't want to tell the story. She could tell part of it, though. My father's views have been shifting steadily away from the party for years. Or, more accurately, he would argue that the party has been shifting away from him and his values. Not just his, but those of his constituents. Often, he ends up opposing the party line. The party usually lets him get away with it. They'd rather keep the seat than risk him voting with them and putting the seat in jeopardy. You're saying that when the party has the votes to pass their bills, they don't expect him to join their side, Thomas said. They want him to get re-elected, which means not going against his constituents' wishes. At her nod, he added, which worked fine when the Senate wasn't so narrowly split. Exactly. But not everybody in the party was on board with that plan, Bentley said. Senator Harrington had a strong opponent in the primary in his last election. Mitchell threatened to throw his support behind that opponent. Mitchell is well known and well respected in my state, Josie said. And well funded, Bentley added. If he'd supported the other candidate, a rabidly pro-choice feminist, the senator probably still would have won, but he'd have depleted his resources to do it. Getting beat up in the primaries only weakens a guy when the general election comes along. It would have made him vulnerable. Makes sense. So, Bentley said, we found a way to encourage Mitchell to keep his mouth shut and his money to himself. Thomas looked from Bentley to her. What did you do? It's not important. Bentley answered before she could, which was good. She had no intention of giving him the details. Those details churned her stomach. They were the reason she was living in New Hampshire instead of D.C. They were the reason she owned a coffee shop instead of working on her father's staff. They were the reason Josie could no longer pretend her father's situation didn't affect her. She'd washed her hands of Washington, but grime didn't wipe away so easily. Mitchell had been biding his time, and now she had no doubt he was relishing this opportunity to get revenge. And that was the reason Josie had to jump back into the fight. Until she found ammunition to use against Mitchell, she would be vulnerable, and so would her father. Bentley was the only one present who understood. Shelley, her oldest friend, Thomas, her new friend, and the 2 bodyguards. Josie and her father weren't the only ones who needed to be cautious. Those who chose to stand with her would land in Mitchell's crosshairs. Which meant, until she could find a way to bring Mitchell down, everybody in this room was vulnerable because of her.
Chapter 18. The photo shoot at the park had alerted everybody in Coventry that Thomas was running for mayor. Not that it had been much of a secret before. News traveled fast in the little town, and after the former mayor was arrested for kidnapping and attempted murder, and a 30-year-old unsolved mystery, everybody was suddenly interested in politics. Thomas had been fielding questions all over town, from clients at his office, from fellow diners at the Patriot. Some guy had even approached him in the locker room at the gym after his morning workout. Nothing like trying to have a serious conversation about elementary school curricula while wearing nothing but a towel. Ms. Robichaud was right about people's perception of Thomas and his relationship with Josie, but with Josie's help, he'd managed to get an article printed in the local paper that covered both her arrest and the reasons the DA had decided not to press charges. That had helped. Some. Whether it helped or not, he wasn't going back on his promise to protect Josie. If it hurt him in the election, so be it. It had been over a week since the arrest and nothing else had happened. But he didn't think for a minute that her enemies had given up. And Josie didn't seem to believe that either. Before and after their daily campaign meetings, he'd caught her poring over her laptop, trying to find a connection between what had happened to her in Coventry and Jude Mitchell. If she'd found anything, she hadn't shared it with Thomas. The bodyguards had located no tracker on her car, which meant the man in the red cap had been watching her, and Thomas hadn't noticed him. Nobody had. It was just before 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon when Josie followed Lake into the cafe's back room and settled beside Thomas at the table near the cold fireplace, dropping her oversized purse on the floor. Though he would prefer to sit with her on the cozy sofa on the other side of the room, the bodyguards had asked Josie to stay away from the windows. This was the safest spot in the cafe's dining room. "You're not limping," he said. She lifted the offending ankle and turned it in a circle. All healed. "That's good news. Where's Shelley?" Lately, Shelley had joined her more often than not, and always for their campaign meetings. Bentley had flown out of town a few days prior. Not surprising how much more Thomas enjoyed life when the guy wasn't around. "I've got the afternoon off," Josie said. "Shelley and Bentley's bickering has got to get on your nerves." She gave him a closed-mouth, eyebrows lifted look that had him squirming. Maybe he shouldn't be throwing stones where bickering was concerned. "I'll try to knock it off, but your ex is eminently dislikable." "He's not," she said. "He's brilliant and talented and, most of the time, pretty charming." Her words burned like scalding coffee. "If you say so." Apparently, she didn't buy the mild response, so he figured it wouldn't hurt to add the question that begged to be asked. "If he's so great, why is he your ex-fiancé?" "He belongs in Washington, and I'm never going back." Was she saying that if Bentley would move to New Hampshire, she'd get back together with him? Did she still care for the guy? Because Thomas's feelings for Josie were only growing with all the time they spent together, and Bentley obviously wanted her back. Somebody was going to have his heart crushed. She was studying him. Hopefully his thoughts hadn't been broadcast on his face. "I really wish you'd stop calling him Beta." "Golly, I wouldn't want to hurt the guy's fragile feelings." "His feelings aren't hurt. He's tougher than that. It just makes him think you're adult." "I don't care what he thinks of me." She held Thomas's gaze, no smile there, no amusement. Apparently she cared. If Thomas wanted to have a shot, he should probably do as she asked. "Fine. No more Beta. Though I have to admit, I've been waiting for him to ask me why I call him that." "He won't. Not because he's not curious, but because he refuses to give you the satisfaction." Thomas would behave exactly the same way. "Where is he anyway? Off on some grand adventure?" Josie lifted one shoulder. "We've both been trying to gather intel on Mitchell. He didn't tell me who he was meeting, but it's related to that." She glanced at the time on her phone. "I thought Derek was coming today. Don't you and he usually meet on Mondays?" "He's happy to step aside and let you be in charge." "Really?" She seemed genuinely shocked. "I thought he'd be offended at my presence." "He was only helping because he knew I didn't know what I was doing. He's got a business to run, so if we don't need him..." "Did you show him what we put together? The platform? The flyers?" The man had gushed his praise. "He approves." "Huh." She seemed perplexed. "What?" "It's just rare for people to take a back seat when there's power involved." Thomas couldn't help his laugh. "This isn't D.C. If I win this race, I'll have tens and tens of dollars at my disposal." "Not that little." He shrugged. "I'm going to get paid peanuts. It's a part-time job. I'll be inheriting a boatload of problems and debt thanks to Salcedo's mismanagement. It's not as if people are fighting over this job. Farley wants it badly enough." Thomas's amusement faded. Farley's planning to get rich with his own investments and maybe kickbacks. I'm just trying to protect my town. She smiled at him, a sweet expression which he'd come to understand meant she was impressed, and his heart hitched. We need to talk about your announcement, she said. Most everybody knows you're running already, of course, but you need to create a media event to make a formal announcement. A presser or... I was thinking I'd do it at Liberty Fest. 4th of July is 2 weeks from today, and the festival will begin on Sunday. There's an opening ceremony where the town officials welcome everybody and give speeches. Can you get on the agenda? It's run by the Chamber of Commerce, and I happen to be friends with the president. She's supporting me. I talked to her a couple of days ago, and she said she'd be happy to give me a few minutes. How well attended is that opening ceremony, though? Josie asked. There usually aren't that many tourists there yet, but everybody with booths will be there. Everybody with a stake in the festival. People who own businesses and run nonprofits, not to mention lots of town employees who need to be there for various reasons. Josie was nodding. I see what you're saying. It won't be a lot of people, but they'll be the people you want to reach. Exactly. I'll have the rest of that day and all of the next, all the Liberty Fest events, to reach everybody else. I've rented a booth at the festival and plan to walk in the parade. I sponsored the fireworks, so my name will be attached to that. There's always a fancy dinner the night of the 3rd, a fundraising event for the year's project. Project? What do you mean? You've been to Liberty Fest, right? The café's taken part in the tasting. That's right. You provide iced coffee. And tea. But other than that, I'm usually here, manning the store. We get a lot of business that week, people who need a break from the heat. Every year, the Chamber surveys the community and chooses a local nonprofit to support. Oh yeah, I filled out that survey. This year, it's the Youth Center. They're hoping to expand into the storefront next door, add a game room, table tennis, and pool tables. It'll be a place for local kids to hang out. The Chamber sells tickets, provides a fancy catered dinner, and dancing. The person who runs the charity, in this case Cassidy Sullivan, will get up and give a speech to explain the organization. People will write checks. The whole thing benefits the charity, and at the same time, the locals get to have a fun night. I've never been, but it sounds like a great event, Josie said. How could you use it? I've been asked to introduce Cassidy and the Youth Center, which will give me the opportunity to discuss the needs of Coventry. I bought a couple of tables, and I'll invite a handful of my supporters. It'll be another opportunity to shake hands with people, get my picture in the paper. Farley will be there, of course. He'll be at all of this stuff, Thomas said. Josie smiled. You've got this all figured out. I don't think you need me at all. He laughed. I couldn't do any of this without you. I do think you're rubbing off on me, though. A throat cleared and Bentley entered. Sorry to interrupt. Great. The guy was back. Thomas had hoped he'd get caught up in Washington and never return. Still, he forced an amiable expression. Bentley. The man's eyebrows hiked. Thomas. Then he looked at Josie. Thought I'd find you here. We're in a strategy meeting. You need me for something? Got information. Maybe we can talk about it. Come on in, Thomas said, if you don't mind my hearing it. Bentley squinted and studied him as if looking for the catch. Thomas was trying very hard to propose a truce without actually proposing a truce. Maybe if he made the first move, Josie would be impressed. He'd do just about anything to impress her, even make nice with her ex. Bentley pulled up a chair and joined them. Did you learn anything about Mitchell? A little, Josie said. He's at a conference in Europe somewhere. She shifted to Thomas. Are you sure it's all right if we... Please. He hadn't asked what she'd been up to, figuring she'd tell him when she was ready. I'd like to know what you've learned. So he's out of the country? That doesn't mean he's not behind all this, Bentley said. He has people. Makes sense, Thomas said, eliciting another curious look from the guy. She pulled her laptop from her bag and opened it. I can't find any connection between Mitchell and New Hampshire except the abortion clinic he owns in Nashua. This far north? Bentley rubbed his chin. He's expanding. I did a deep dive on the high-level employees there, but found nothing concerning, she said. I hired someone to look into Mitchell's finances. It looks like he's been buying up real estate in poor areas of the nation's larger cities where abortion will most likely remain legal. Not just New York, LA, and Chicago, but Sacramento, Denver, Las Vegas, Boston. He's purchased commercial property in 12 markets, and my source tells me he's in negotiations on another 3. Altogether, he's on the hook for over $1 billion in those properties. Thomas whistled. Holy smoke. How much money does this guy have? The abortion industry's a cash cow, Bentley said. For him, and a lot of people with a financial stake in the game, it's not about reproductive rights. They're fighting for their right to rake in millions. He turned his attention to Josie. If this bill doesn't pass this session, it'll be years before there's another chance. The slightest downturn in the economy before he unloads those properties. Mitchell could lose big time. With $1 billion on the line, not to mention what the man stood to gain if those commercial properties became his latest abortion clinics, Mitchell had all the incentive he needed to come after Senator Harrington. And Josie snapped her laptop closed. But knowing that doesn't help us stop him. Exactly, Bentley said, which is why I reached out to a contact at his organization, and she said, wait, Josie said, what contact? Someone I met a few months ago. Name's not important. We were at a fundraising event. After a couple of drinks, she started talking about the guy. I guess he's got quite the reputation for unseemly behavior. Meaning? Josie asked. He's a little too familiar and handsy with his female employees. When women complain, their accusations are brushed aside. This woman told me that after she filed a complaint with HR, people she worked with, women she worked with, pressured her to retract her statement. Said that he does so much for women's rights that he should be afforded a little grace. Oh, come on, Josie said. Someone actually said that to her? More than one. She feared her job was on the line, her reputation. There were no overt threats, but it was impressed upon her that if she didn't retract her statement, she'd have trouble getting another job. So the guy pushes for more abortions to fill his own coffers and then uses that as an excuse to sexually harass women? Thomas couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. What a pig. Bentley barely glanced his way, but he nodded. What exactly does this woman do? Josie asked. Bentley shook his head. Sorry, can't say. Josie's eyebrows hiked. Okay, tell me more about her. She was putting out feelers for a new job. I talked her into staying, told her I could use her help. She agreed to spy on her employer? Josie asked. He shrugged. She really dislikes Mitchell. Or she really likes you. Thomas wished he could see into Josie's thoughts, know what she was thinking. Her words, her tone, they didn't give enough away. Bentley held her eye contact. My affections are elsewhere. I wonder if she knows that. She does. Josie studied him for a few moments, leaving Thomas to feel like a third wheel. He needed to get this tricycle back on track, because he wasn't about to slink out the door. Thomas asked, Everybody knows you work for Senator Harrington, right? Bentley's eyes narrowed. What if this woman got friendly with you to feed you misinformation? It's not like that. Josie looked from one to the other, her gaze settling on Bentley. Thomas asks a good question, Bent. Are you certain? He held her eye contact and something passed between them. Thomas's jealousy spiked. He hated their connection, hated how well they understood each other. Seemingly satisfied, Josie asked, So what did she have to say? Mitchell's fighting mad about your father's refusal to support the bill. He's been breathing threats, Josie. Bentley lowered his voice. Dangerous threats. The expression on Bentley's face made Thomas's heart thump hard. Like what? Bentley spared him a glance. Like he knows what's important to the senator. He trained his gaze on Josie again. He knows who's important to him. Before the words settled, Josie said, We already know he's willing to come after me. He's already shown his hand. He's not going to give up. He has until the session ends, meaning months, to get your father on board. Dad's not going to change his mind. Bentley stood. You and I should continue this conversation upstairs. To Thomas, he added, I'm sure you have work to do. You two can strategize later, right? Thomas rose. I'll join you. He turned to Josie. If that's all right. Yes, of course. She started for the inside staircase, the bodyguard by her side. When her back was turned, Bentley shot Thomas a look that might have left a bruise, but Thomas forced a smile. If they were going to keep Josie safe, then they'd need to work together. He could do it for Josie, and if it meant he got to spend more time with her, all the better. Since Bentley'd taken the spot beside Josie on the couch, Thomas chose the club chair catty-corner from her. When they were all settled, he spoke first. "What are you afraid this guy's going to do?" "There's no telling." Bentley focused on Josie. "I wouldn't put anything past him. I honestly think your life could be in danger." Thomas's stomach flipped at the words, but Josie scoffed. "Oh, please, Mitchell's not going to have me killed," as if Dad would give in to his demands at that point. "We have to keep his endgame in mind. He wants to get Dad to vote for the bill. Killing me wouldn't do that. Unless your father thought you were just the first. There's your brother and his family, your mother, and we both know." Bentley eyed Thomas, then pressed his lips closed. "Know what?" Thomas asked. "Stay in your lane," Bentley snapped, keeping his eyes on Josie. Thomas had to force himself not to toss the arrogant prig out the second-floor window. But Josie seemed to take Bentley's side. Her voice was kind when she said, "We have history with Mitchell. He has good reason to target me." "What reason?" Bentley and Josie eyed each other, but said nothing. Lake was standing in the corner, and though her expression gave little away, Thomas caught a hint of frustration cross her features. Both of them were trying to keep Josie safe. Having to do it in the dark didn't sit well, but Josie wouldn't tell him anything with Bentley in the room. "Fine," Thomas said. "So Mitchell dislikes you, wants to target you." He addressed his question to Bentley. "Why do you think that means he'd actually harm her?" Bentley spoke to Josie as if she'd asked the question. "You already know he's staked a fortune on getting this bill passed. There's a reason my contact retracted her statement. She's close enough to him to have seen how he deals with enemies. She wasn't only afraid for her job, she was afraid for her safety. According to her, he's still smarting over what happened. Before." Bentley's lips screwed up, and his face reddened. "Even though you and I both know it was mostly my plan, he blames you, and he's looking for revenge." Josie's face paled. "It was our plan." Bentley ignored that. "Which is why," he flicked a glance at Thomas. "Does he really need to be here for this? I think we should—" "You can trust Thomas." "I don't." Bentley heaved a breath. "I told your father this morning what my contact told me. We agree it's time for you to consider hiding. You and I could—" "Forget it." She stood. "I'm not leaving." Thomas stood as well. "Are you really using this as a ploy to win her back?" Bentley glared. "As important as your desire is to date my fiancée, I am not your fiancé." Bentley flinched at her words but continued speaking to Thomas. "Her safety trumps—" "Okay, wait a minute." Thomas lifted his hands and forced his frustration down. He faced Josie. "Let's take Bentley out of the equation." He met the other man's eyes, challenging him to argue. Bentley nodded for him to continue. Thomas settled back in his chair and waited for Josie to do the same. "Let's say we could find people to keep the cafe running while you're gone. When this is over, you can come back to it. Resume your life here." "I refuse to hide," Josie said. "Then don't." As much as it pained him to agree with Bentley, and the idea of Josie being gone hurt even worse, Bentley wasn't wrong. "Take an extended trip. You and Shelley go somewhere out of the public eye, off the radar. Kick off your shoes and rest." "For 6 months?" She sounded incredulous. "It wouldn't be 6 months," Bentley said. "If the election goes the way we think it will, we're going to lose seats come November, and there's no way the bill will pass with a lame duck Senate. So only 5 months." The words were doused in sarcasm. "That makes all the difference." "Less than 5, Thomas said. 4.5. 18, 19 weeks. A blink in the scheme of life." "A blink? You consider 5 months a blink?" Thomas held her eye contact. "I consider your life worth that and a lot more. That's because you're not the one being asked to leave everything behind. I would sacrifice that and more to keep you—" "You're right." Bentley's words intruded like an armored tank. "I knew you wouldn't do it. Even if you did, Mitchell could find you no matter where you went, unless you're willing to take your bodyguards with you." "And what would be the point of that?" Josie said. "I have them here. I'm just going to take my chances. Lake and Donley, and you guys. I feel safe with all of you." I knew you'd say that, Bentley said, which is why I told your father he should vote yes on the bill. It's the only real solution. He won't. Josie sat back, satisfied. Bentley's lips slid to one side as he watched her. A moment passed before he reached out and took her hand. Thomas clenched his fist to keep from knocking the guy away. Carlisle's on my side. Nobody wins if your father refuses to give in. Not you, not him, not the party. She yanked her hand back. The taxpayers win. Good wins. Good doesn't have a vote, and most of the taxpayers will never know the difference. If he votes in favor of it, he'll infuriate his constituents. He'll risk his seat. If he votes against the bill, the party's going to do everything in its power to make sure he loses his re-election bid. They can't let him get away with this. You know that. His political career will be over. That's up to Dad. His vote is up to him. I refuse to allow him to vote against his conscience in order to protect me, and I don't think he will. Thomas didn't think so either, no matter what Bentley and Carlyle counseled him to do, which meant there was nothing else to talk about. Bentley regarded Josie for a long moment, but when Thomas expected him to concede her point and end the discussion, he only shifted. Then that leaves us with only one choice. He leaned toward Josie, but she angled away as if she knew what was coming. We have to go on the offensive. I can't. Her words were barely a whisper. I won't do it again. Everything in Thomas wanted to demand to know what they were talking about, but the way the color leached from Josie's face and the fear in her eyes kept him quiet. Bentley stood. Maybe you can't, but I can.
Chapter 19. Josie should have told Bentley to back off. She should have told him that she wouldn't have him using devious tricks in order to protect her. She should have told him that no vote, and no promise of safety, was worth what had happened the last time they'd played dirty. But she hadn't said one word. Because as much as she disliked alpha personalities, as much as she feared them, and as much as she distrusted them, they knew how to get the job done. She'd forgotten that about Bentley. In her time in Coventry, sequestered away from all the people she'd been surrounded by all her life, Dad, Carlyle, Bentley, and others, she'd forgotten the simple fact that those on her side were no less powerful, no less willing to fight for what they believed in, using any means necessary, as those on the opposite side. Just because she'd given up all those dirty tricks didn't mean everybody had. Jude Mitchell wasn't above playing them on her, and now Bentley had dived headfirst back into the game. Which was why Josie had no plans, no desire, to ever re-enter the world of politics. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Bentley had returned from D.C. The conversation she'd had with Bentley and Thomas had been followed by one with her father, who'd assured her that, despite Carlyle and Bentley's recommendation, he didn't plan to capitulate to anybody's demands. And then Dad had prayed for her safety right there on the phone, making Carlyle and Bentley incredibly uncomfortable. Which had been, honestly, a little amusing. Unfortunately, it had also been nearly 2 weeks since Josie had enjoyed a good night's sleep, a night free of the nightmares she'd thought were behind her for good. She'd spent those 2 weeks trying to find something, anything, she could use to connect the threats against her to Jude Mitchell. If she could prove he was trying to scare her to force her father's vote, she could threaten to go public with that information to get him to back off. If he didn't, then she'd be forced to call the newspapers. That action would reveal her true identity to the people of Coventry, but if it meant she'd be safe and her father'd be free to vote his conscience, it would be a price worth paying. The last 2 weeks had been difficult, no doubt, but they'd also been largely uneventful. She hoped, prayed, that meant Mitchell had decided to back off. Maybe, when Dad hadn't capitulated to his demands, he'd realized he wouldn't be able to sway his vote. Maybe, but Josie doubted it. It was Saturday, the night before the first day of Liberty Fest, the last opportunity to get ready for Thomas's big announcement. Unfortunately, he'd been playing catch-up all day at work and wouldn't be able to come by until later. Shelley lounged on the sofa in Josie's living room, back against the arm, one foot suspended above the floor, sipping a glass of red wine. Josie rarely drank, but her best friend was drinking enough for both of them lately, bringing a fresh bottle over every couple of days to enjoy during their dinners together. Despite their ongoing feud, when Bentley was there, he often poured himself a glass. When he wasn't, Shelley drank alone. Who knew how much she drank once she got back to Thomas's condo? It was concerning. Josie fixed herself a glass of ice water and settled into the club chair adjacent to the sofa. "Does your new boyfriend like wine as much as you do?" Josie tried to ask the question as innocently as possible. Shelley paused, glass halfway to her lips, and peered at her over the rim. By the look on her face, she knew what Josie was really asking, but planned to let the question go unchallenged. She took a generous sip and swallowed. "He doesn't drink at all, which is probably why I'm going a little overboard now. He gives me a look." She leveled a stare at Josie, who glanced away. "When he disapproves." Obviously, that was not a line of questioning Shelley welcomed. Lake sat on a kitchen chair she'd pulled near the door. No matter what they said, and Shelley had tested this theory often, spewing out the most outlandish remarks, Lake only reacted when she considered Josie's safety to be in question. Josie changed tack. "What do you and he do for fun?" Shelley's face lit up. "We don't get to spend nearly enough time together. When he's ready to introduce me to his kids, that'll change. But for now, we usually get together for long weekends when they're with their mother. We go to his vacation home sometimes, up in the Poconos. We spent a weekend on the beach once. Mostly, we just stay in, watch movies, sometimes go to dinner." Though the guy claimed to be a Christian, if they were going away together, then he wasn't such a follower that it kept him from sleeping with his girlfriend. Not that Josie should be throwing stones in that regard. Hadn't she claimed to be a Christian when she and Bentley were dating? Hadn't they moved in together after he proposed? Talking the talk of Christianity was a lot easier than walking the walk. "You two get to catch up very often?" Josie hadn't seen her friend talking on her cell much, but Shelley spent a lot of time tapping on the screen. "We talk every night after he puts his kids to bed." Her eyes took on a dreamy look. "I miss him so much. I can't wait to see him again." "When will he get back?" 2 weeks, Shelley said. "His kids'll go to the ex's house, and he and I will have the second half of the summer to ourselves." "What does he do for work that he can take so much time off?" Shelley shrugged. "He owns his own business, something related to finance or investing. He works from home a lot." She swung her feet to the floor. "Enough about me, though. Let's talk about you and Thomas. You've been spending a lot of time together." They had. An hour or so every afternoon, working through campaign issues. Shelley or Bentley or both generally attended those meetings. Shelley to help. Bentley to help protect her. Or so he said. Josie suspected his attendance was more about making sure Josie and Thomas were never alone. What neither Bentley nor Shelley knew was that, every night after Thomas closed the office for the day, usually between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, he climbed her exterior staircase and knocked on her door. The first time he'd done it, the Monday after her false arrest, he'd said he wouldn't be able to sleep unless he knew Josie was safe for the evening. The first few times, she'd been surprised by his knock. By the fourth day, she'd found herself looking forward to it. Since then, she'd made sure to shoo Shelley, and when he was in town, Bentley out of her apartment early so she and Thomas could have time alone. Not that anything had come of it. She usually offered him something to eat. Sometimes he took her up on the offer, sometimes he didn't. He never stayed more than 30 minutes. But those 30 minutes, just the thought of them had heat rising to her cheeks. There was something incredibly attractive about a man who went out of his way to check on her every night. A man who'd moved out of his comfortable condo and let a virtual stranger move in order to be available if she needed him. A man who'd never once gone back on his vow to quit asking her out. She wasn't sure what to think about that last one. "Oh my gosh!" Shelley's shrill tone snapped Josie back to the moment. "You like him." "What are you, 12? Shelley giggled. "Oh, I don't think you like him the same way you liked Cody Finnegan in 6th grade. "Wow." Josie sat back in her chair. "I haven't thought about Cody Finnegan in years." She pictured the middle school version of a tall, dark, and handsome bad boy. Cody'd been sent to the headmaster's office more than once for his antics. I wonder what he's doing now. Computer programmer. He lives in Austin, married with 3 kids. Josie laughed. How do you know that? She shrugged. I keep up with people. He's on social media. His wife's got a face for radio, but his kids are cute. You haven't changed one bit. You love that about me. Josie smiled. Her friend knew her well. Shelley drained her wine glass. Don't think you've sidetracked me. What's the latest on you and Thomas? There's no latest. We're friends, that's all. Puffed. She stood and headed for the kitchen. Whatever. Seriously. Through the open door, Shelley called. We both know he wishes he were more than a friend. She returned, her glass half full of dark red liquid. Hasn't he asked you out yet? Because I can give him a little push. Don't even think about it. Josie leveled her friend with a look. That's not what I want. Shelley plopped back on the sofa. Lie to yourself all you want, my friend, but I see that twinkle in your eye. Let me ask you this. If he were to ask you out, would you say yes? A fair question. Josie shrugged, but at Shelley's raised eyebrows she said, I would say yes, but it's not going to happen. I wouldn't be so sure about that. He promised he wouldn't ask me out again. Her friend's already raised eyebrows practically disappeared into her scalp. Again? What is this? Josie shrugged. He asked a few times over the last couple of months, but then, the night he carried me off the mountain, he promised he wouldn't ask again. Shelley stared as if Josie'd just explained nuclear physics in pig Latin. You seriously made him promise not to? I didn't make him. He just did. Well then, I guess you're going to have to ask him. Josie wasn't about to do that. She was a 21st century woman and all that, but asking a man out felt desperate. Please tell me you're not letting Bentley stand in your way. No, not really. How could Josie explain how she felt about Bentley to her friend? He's working so hard to try to make things work with me. He even said he'd move here. Shelley scrunched her face like the words had come with a rancid scent. Do you want him to? She allowed herself to consider the question. Seriously consider it. If Bentley walked in the door at that moment and told her he'd bought a house in town, she would feel trapped, stuck. Because the truth was, she didn't love Bentley, not anymore. Now that she'd rededicated her life to Christ, she wondered if she'd ever loved him, or if she'd just used him to fill a chasm of loneliness in her life that she now knew only God could fill. Where is the loser anyway? Don't talk about him like that, Josie snapped. She'd had enough of Shelley's cutting remarks, and his about her for that matter. They'd never been great friends, but they'd tried harder before Josie had left D.C., at least in front of her. Josie went into the kitchen and started the water boiling for dinner. Thomas would be there soon. Shelley stepped into the doorway and leaned against the jamb. Sorry. A moment passed before she spoke again. So, where is he? He's spending all his spare time trying to keep me safe and protect my father. You might not like us together, but you can at least acknowledge what he's done, what he's doing. Shelley's lips pressed together, and she looked away. Fine. But then she met Josie's eyes with a challenge. He works for your father, so whether you two were together or not, he'd have to be doing what he's doing. It's his job. It's not for you. It's not only for me, Shelley, but it's also for me. Fine, maybe. Why do you hate him so much? I don't trust him, never have. He's a gold-digging social climber, and you were an easy mark, daughter of a senator, wealthy and well-connected. He, meanwhile, came from redneck parents, went to college on a scholarship because they couldn't afford to send him otherwise. You don't like him because his parents are poor? Wow, snobby much? It's not that. Tense silence stretched between them, but Josie wasn't about to fill it. Shelley dated her share of guys, many of whom hadn't come from their same social strata. Where did she get off judging Bentley? At least he wasn't abusive. At least he'd never attempted to empty Josie's bank account. Could Shelley say the same about the yahoos in her past? She added salt to the water, stared at it until tiny bubbles rose from the bottom, and admitted an ugly truth. She was judging Shelley as harshly as Shelley was judging Bentley. The two of them must have had a run-in, one neither had dragged Josie into. She didn't understand it, and maybe she was glad she didn't. She cared about them both. She didn't want to have to choose. The water boiled, and she added linguine, then stirred to keep the noodles from sticking together. "You know how guys like that are," Shelley finally said. "They're always looking for gain. Maybe Bentley came to love you, but he asked you out the first time because of who you are, not because of any feelings on his part." Josie turned to face her. "You can't know that." "I know, Joe. Trust me. I know." "How?" But Shelley just shook her head. Her friend's refusal to answer, this woman who couldn't keep a secret to save a loved one's soul, had Josie's stomach turning. Did Shelley know something about Bentley Josie didn't? And if so, why wouldn't she share it? Why not use it as ammo to get Josie to end things with Bentley once and for all? Before she asked, a knock sounded. Not that she wasn't excited for Thomas to arrive, but she wished she could question her friend, dig into that last comment. She'd have to put that on her to-do list for another day. One way or another, she needed to figure out what had happened between her best friend and her ex, because the animosity between them was worse than ever, and there had to be a reason why. Lake, the silent presence in the corner, peeked out the door. She turned to Josie. "Thomas!" Josie pretended her heart didn't get all aflutter at the sound of his name. "Let him in." The bodyguard did, and Thomas stepped into the space. He usually wore a suit and tie, but tonight he had on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt that showed off all his muscles. Not that Josie should notice such things. "Sorry I'm so late. Someone called just when I was about to close up and wanted me to write a new auto policy." He shifted his gaze. "Hey, Shelley. Glad you're here." "Oh, don't worry. I won't be staying long. I just wanted to hear your speech for tomorrow, and then I'll leave you two alone." Thomas's gaze flicked to Josie, but she just shrugged. This was Shelley being Shelley. "The pasta will be done in a sec," Josie said. "What can I get you to drink?" 10 minutes later, the three of them settled at the small kitchen table and shared linguine with fresh tomatoes, chunks of mozzarella, grated parmesan, basil, garlic, and olive oil. Josie had snagged a loaf of bread from the café, which rounded out the summer meal. Thomas was 4 bites into it before he commented, his eyes wide when they met hers. "Wow, I was hungry, and this is delicious. Thank you." Her cheeks warmed, and she lowered her gaze. "No problem." She turned to the bodyguard in the corner. "Lake, help yourself." The woman crossed into the kitchen to make herself a plate, then returned to her chair by the door to eat. Josie, Shelley, and Thomas talked and laughed throughout the meal, Shelley and Thomas trying to one-up each other with wild stories. Rather than participate in the verbal Olympics, Josie just listened, enjoying their easy camaraderie. When the meal was over, they left the dishes for later and returned to the living area, where Thomas, obviously feeling self-conscious with the small audience, gave his announcement speech. She'd never heard him speak in public, and though this wasn't public per se, it was probably more awkward to speak in front of two than it would be to speak in front of a crowd the following day. She'd been around politicians all her life. She'd heard some of the best, most well-trained public speakers on the planet. And yet when Thomas spoke, his tone was so genuine, his words so heartfelt, she wasn't sure she'd ever been as moved by a speaker. When he finished, Shelley stood and clapped. "Oh my gosh, that was amazing!" Shelley was the only person Josie knew whose dialogue usually sounded like it should end with exclamation points. "You were so good," Shelley added. "How did you learn to do that?" Thomas shrugged one shoulder, his gaze barely flicking to Shelley. He seemed to be waiting for Josie's reaction. "That was outstanding." Red crept up his neck, and his lips spread in a shy smile. "Really?" "Oh, don't be so bashful." Shelley rounded the coffee table to smack him playfully on the shoulder. "You know you're awesome." "I'm sure I don't," he said, surprise clear in his wide eyes. "I can't wait to see you in action tomorrow," Shelley added. Thomas settled on the chair, and Josie didn't miss the worry in his expression when he spoke to her. "I think you should reconsider." She leaned his way. "Be honest with me, Thomas. Do you not want me there because you're afraid I'm going to hurt your campaign? No. The word came out fast, and she didn't doubt his sincerity. Absolutely not. We covered that. Shelley focused on Josie as she settled beside her on the sofa again. The best way to deal with bad publicity is to lean into it. It would be one thing if you were guilty, but no charges were filed. You did nothing wrong. If Thomas were to distance himself from you, it would make you look guilty, and him look guilty by association. Josie knew her friend's argument. She hadn't been convinced until Bentley had tacitly agreed with her assessment with his offhand remark. Who cares if it's better for Thomas's campaign? This is about your safety. Thomas's expression, as always, broadcast no duplicity. Of course I want you there, Josie. I just don't want you to put yourself in danger. It's not worth that. Except for church. Both Bentley and Shelley had gone, though neither had seemed particularly comfortable with it. I haven't left this building since the arrest. Marcel's been managing the shopping. Kinsley won't even let me meet the delivery trucks. If I don't get out of this place, I'll go stir-crazy. There's the dinner tomorrow night, Thomas said. It should be easier to protect you there. He looked at Lake for confirmation. The woman said, We can keep you safe at both events, ma'am. We've got it covered. Thomas looked pleased, but like he was fighting it. The man really needed to work on those facial expressions. I'm going to see your big speech, Josie said. No arguments. And you'll come to the fundraiser tomorrow night? He confirmed. Oh, she'll be there, and she'll look fabulous. Shelley stood. You did a great job, Thomas. No kidding. She leaned down and kissed Josie on the cheek. Thanks for dinner. Thomas, you'll help Josie with the dishes, right? Of course. Good, good. See you tomorrow at the park. Break a leg and all that. Shelley slipped out the door and closed it behind her, leaving them, aside from the silent bodyguard, all alone.
Chapter 20. Thomas stared at the closed door a moment while the air settled after the whirlwind that was Josie's closest friend. She is a unique soul. Josie was clearing the table. That's one way to put it. He chuckled and turned to Lake, whose plate was empty on her lap. May I? Thanks. The woman stood and handed it to him. She was as tall as Thomas and had a killer body, but she seemed to have all the personality of a jar of mayonnaise. Or maybe it was her job to hide her personality behind that mask. He'd seen enough of Shelley's attempts to get a rise out of the bodyguard to know she was unflappable. Donnelly at least would crack a smile every now and then. Thomas grabbed the rest of the dishes off the table and joined Josie in the kitchen, where she was already elbow-deep in soapy water. How do you survive without a dishwasher? She glanced his way. It's usually just me, and I eat half my meals in the café. He tore a paper towel from the roll and leaned beside Josie to wet it from the spigot, trying very hard to ignore the way his every nerve buzzed at her closeness. As he'd done 1,000 times since he'd carried her off that mountain, he kicked himself for telling her he wouldn't ask her out again. Now that they were getting to know each other, he got the distinct impression she liked him, and his admiration for her had only grown stronger. But a promise was a promise. If they were ever going to move from friendship to dating, she was going to have to ask him out. Would she, though? He wanted to linger beside her, but he forced himself to return to the table in the living area to wipe it down. That task completed, he grabbed a towel and started drying dishes and putting them away. He knew where everything went. He came over every evening to check on her, and more often than not, she offered him dinner. Not that he needed to eat her food, but he'd jump at any excuse to remain in her presence. He'd need to offer to bring dinner for her this week. Josie handed him a wet plate. You feel ready for tomorrow? I do, he said. If you and Shelley think the speech was okay, it was perfect. Her praise sent warmth to his neck that had nothing to do with the steam rising from her sink. That means a lot coming from you. She handed him the big pasta bowl. What do you mean coming from me? I'm sure you've met and worked with great politicians and speakers. If you think I'm halfway decent, you're much more than halfway decent, Thomas. She handed him the pasta pot, shut off the water, and drained the sink before turning to face him. You're completely decent, which is why your speech was so good. What do you... His words trailed, and he dried the item as what she'd said registered. She took the pot from him and shoved it in the cabinet. I've worked with a lot of slick politicians. You're right about that. I've seen my share of people who'll say anything and do anything to get elected. My father is a great man, but you don't survive in national politics as long as he has without making compromises. That's the job, though, right? To work with people, to find solutions. We all have to make compromises. Josie leaned against the kitchen counter. Yeah, it's the job. And when the stakes are as high as they are now, Dad sticks to his guns. I love that. But he hasn't always made the right choices. His party's asked him to vote for some pretty lousy legislation, and he's done it to keep the peace, to stay in office. And my great-grandfather, she turned to wipe the countertop. They were both politicians too. My great-grandfather voted against the Civil Rights Bill. My grandfather fought busing as fervently as he fought the communists in Vietnam. He wholeheartedly believed, that races shouldn't mix at all, that they should stay segregated, that interracial marriage was evil. Whoa, that was ugly. They were good men in their own ways, Josie said, but they were wrong, so incredibly wrong. They did a lot of compromising in their time. Not all of it the above-board stuff you and I are talking about. Carlisle's dad worked for my grandfather, and he's told me a lot of stories of corruption and secret deals. She shook her head. Anyway, my dad's not like them, thank God. He's done so much to try to make up for his family legacy, but it's not a great legacy. That's not you, though, Thomas said. You're not like that. My parents raised Alton and me with high ideals. We had a lot of money, but they drilled into our heads that, since we were blessed, it was our job to bless others. They also taught us to see everyone as equal. They raised us to believe there are two races that matter, and those races have nothing to do with skin color. There are those who don't believe in Jesus and those who do. As Mom would say, seed of Adam and seed of Christ. And whichever race a person belongs to, God loves him just the same. So those seed of Adam folks are only in that race because they don't yet understand Jesus' sacrifice. That's a unique way to look at the world. My dad agrees, but Mom's the spiritual rock in our family. Thomas's parents were both strong believers, but Dad had always been the head of their household in spiritual matters. He hoped to be the same someday. I respect my dad so much, Josie continued, but he's made a lot of compromises in his life. Not just in the ways he votes, but in the people he has working for him. The staff did things. She shook her head and pasted on a smile. Anyway, the point is that your speech was so good because you aren't just saying the words. You believe them. You mean them. I do. But the speech was also good because you helped me craft it and coached me on what to do with my hands and all the other little things I would never have thought of. That's just window dressing. Department stores decorated their windows to get people to step in the doors. Thomas was pretty sure the window dressing would be a huge reason why people looked beyond his suit to hear his ideas. Maybe so. He stepped a little closer to her in the small kitchen. But I'm grateful to you for it. If I have any shot at winning this race, it'll be because of you. Oh, well, she blinked at him with those big brown eyes and the air shifted. Something stretched between them like a band, drawing them together. It took all his self-control not to step closer, to pull her into his arms. Because he loved their friendship, he did. But he wasn't satisfied with it. It was just the top layer of the depth of relationship he wanted with this woman. Her lips parted, inviting. Her gaze held his. He didn't move for a long moment, but she didn't step closer. So he ignored the desire pumping in his veins, swallowed the words aching to be said, and stepped back. Thanks for dinner. She looked away. Right. Sure, of course. And for all your help on the campaign. He stepped out of the warm kitchen and into the cooler living area, thankful for the air conditioning pumping. Not that the heat he was feeling had much to do with the room's temperature. He didn't turn to face Josie until he'd crossed to the far wall. The living room was safer than the kitchen. He probably wouldn't give in to the urge to kiss Josie with Lake there. Probably. Still, it seemed wise to leave before he did something stupid. Dinner was delicious as someone knocked on the door. Thomas started to open it, but Lake stopped him with a hand on his wrist. Who is it? The woman asked. Bentley. Thomas's heart sank. He should have kissed Josie when he'd had the chance. He should have kissed her and still been kissing her when the ex showed up. because Bentley wouldn't have let a little thing like a promise stop him. Lake turned to Josie, whose gaze flicked between them. She nodded, and Lake pulled the door open. Bentley stepped inside, eyes squinted and focused on Thomas. "What are you doing here?" Before Thomas could formulate a scathing reply, Josie said, "We were going over his speech for tomorrow." "And having dinner." Thomas probably shouldn't have added that, but the words slipped out. Thomas waited for Bentley's cutting answer. What he saw surprised him. Pain crossed his face so fast, Thomas would have missed it if he hadn't been studying him so closely. Not for the first time since he'd met Josie's ex-fiancée, Thomas faced the fact that Bentley loved her. He loved her, and he wanted her back. The problem was, Thomas wanted her too. He didn't have the same strength of feelings for Josie as Bentley did, not yet. But he knew the feelings were growing. He believed he and Josie could be happy together. Josie could never be happy with Bentley again, not in his world, not with the life they used to have together. Or maybe Thomas just wanted to believe that. The two men stared at each other. Thomas didn't know what to say. Bentley didn't seem to either. Josie crossed the floor. "Did you just get back?" When Bentley turned to her, his whole face smiled. "I missed you." "Oh, I'd better go." Thomas focused on her. "You'll be there?" 12 o'clock. I'll be near the front." "Wait." Bentley looked between them. "Beware." Thomas let Josie feel that, not that Bentley shouldn't already know. He'd listened in on enough of their campaign meetings this week. Thomas is announcing his candidacy tomorrow at the opening ceremony of the 4th of July celebration. "You're not going though, right?" Josie straightened. "Of course, I'm going." "What?" No way." Bentley turned to Lake. "It's outside, right? How can you keep her safe?" "We've got it worked out, sir." "Worked out? Worked." He rounded on Thomas. "You'd put her in danger just to—" "I won't be in danger," Josie said. Thomas didn't blame Bentley for his concern. "I suggested she shouldn't go." Josie spoke to Lake. "Will you explain, please?" "Nobody will expect it," the bodyguard said. "We'll be there less than 30 minutes. Donnelly and I will both be on hand to make sure she's safe, and I've alerted the local police about our plans. If someone were trying to assassinate her, we would play this differently. But that's not what's going on here. Whoever broke into her car and planted those drugs wants to embarrass her, maybe cause a scandal. We should be able to keep that from happening. We'll keep her safe." Bentley listened closely, nodding, but when Lake was through, he stepped closer to Thomas. "If anything happens to Josie, I'll hold you responsible." Thomas clenched his fists, fighting the urge to use them. "Back off." "It's my choice," Josie said. "If anything happens to me, you should hold me responsible." The man took a step back as her words registered, but he didn't look away. Though tempted to smack that look off his face, Thomas nodded to the door. "I was on my way out. If you'll move aside." Bentley did. Thomas aimed a smile Josie's way. "If you change your mind about tomorrow, I'll see you there. You're going to do great." He moved to pass Bentley, who accidentally shifted into his path. Thomas accidentally bumped the man's shoulder before he stepped out the door. The perfect evening should have ended with a kiss. Instead, Josie would spend the rest of it with her ex, who was absolutely right about tomorrow. Josie would take a risk to attend the speech. The dinner tomorrow night would be different, safer, and more easily controlled. But the speeches would be held in the park, in the open. Anything could happen. Thomas had tried to talk her out of attending, but had he tried hard enough? God help him. He wanted her there more than he wanted to do well on his announcement, more than he wanted to win the election. More than anything, he wanted Josie by his side. But if anything happened to her, Bentley wouldn't be the only one to hold Thomas responsible. He'd never forgive himself. Thank God it had cooled off now that the sun had fallen below the trees. Thomas still felt overwhelmed by the support he'd received in response to his formal announcement for mayor that afternoon. His speech had been succinct and well-crafted, and his delivery, not bad. Okay, he could admit to himself that it was the best speech he'd ever given in his life. Not that he'd done much public speaking, but he'd done his share, thanks to the help of two very capable women, mostly Josie, but Shelley had done her part. He'd managed to hold the audience's attention, his own focus traveling over the crowd and more than once landing on the beautiful woman near the front. Whenever he'd locked gazes with Josie, he'd soaked up the confidence in her smile. As important as that speech had been, this evening's was probably even more so. At the opening ceremony, he'd spoken to locals, business owners, and public employees. He needed their votes, no doubt. But tonight, he'd be speaking to a different kind of crowd, people who didn't hesitate to pull out their wallets for $100+ a plate dinner. These were the people who could fund his campaign, people who could make or break him, and many of them might be leaning towards supporting Farley, who'd painted himself as a friend to business. Thomas had memorized the speech he and Josie had written, but he jotted the high points on note cards just in case he froze under pressure. He stood at the edge of the stage, gazing out at the huge crowd in the clear tent on the grounds of the lakeside park. The decorating committee had done a great job. Each supporting pole was wrapped with garland, the flowers similar to those in the fancy centerpieces on each of the 25 tables that ring the dance floor. White lights twinkled overhead, along with a disco ball that would surely begin spinning when the band got going. None of that held Thomas's attention, though. He'd gotten pulled into conversations all day, which had made him late. He'd run home to shower and change into his tux for the evening festivities. He hadn't planned to meet Josie and Shelley before the speeches, but it felt weird that he hadn't greeted them when they'd arrived. They were there, weren't they? Josie and Shelley, and of course Bentley, who was worried for her safety, along with the 2 bodyguards. They had to be somewhere. Farley was on stage, and Thomas should really be listening to what the interim mayor had to say, but he was distracted, searching the crowd. The 2 tables he'd sponsored were supposed to be near the front. Thomas shifted to get a better angle, and there Josie was, at a table on the far side of the room, Shelley on her left, Bentley on her right. Lake stood a few feet away against one of the poles. All the tent sides had been pulled back to let the breeze in, so the enclosed venue he'd imagined wasn't as enclosed as he'd hoped. But Lake was scanning the crowd. A perimeter rope had been set up around the tent to keep out anybody who hadn't paid for a ticket, so nobody should get in who wasn't meant to be there. Donnelly stood near the entrance, his back to another pole. Other police officers ringed the area. Thomas was surprised to see Rich Fontier, Zach's partner and Thomas's old friend. Josie should be safe. He prayed so. If anything happened to her. The audience clapped, signaling that the mayor had finished his speech. The MC, Andrew Middleton, thanked him, made a few jokes, and then, "I'd like to welcome Thomas Windham to the stage. Thomas, come on up." Thomas's stomach filled with acid, but he sent up a quick prayer, smiled at the crowd, climbed the steps, and shook Andrew's hand. Knock 'em dead. Andrew was new to Coventry, one of the guys who went to Braden's on Monday nights. He spoke the words low as he clapped Thomas on the shoulder. "Let's hope nobody has to die," he responded just as quietly. Andrew chuckled as he jogged down the steps. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas launched into his speech, which was mostly an introduction to Cassidy Sullivan, the director of the youth center and another of his friends. He peppered his remarks with comments about Coventry, what was good for the town, and what wasn't. His speech was touching, he hoped, mentioning a few of the kids Cassidy's organization helped. It was challenging, encouraging the listeners to not just give money, but to give of their time and talents to the town's youth. And it was lighthearted, eliciting a few laughs. He painted a picture of the Coventry where he'd grown up and the Coventry where he hoped to raise a family someday. Again, thanks to Josie, it was an excellent speech, and Thomas grew in confidence as he delivered it. When he finished with, "It's my great pleasure to introduce Cassidy Sullivan," the crowd rose in applause. Thomas stepped back and waited for Cassidy to join him on the stage. She looked gorgeous, the little bit of weight she still carried since the birth of her baby only enhancing her features. She joined him behind the podium, took his hands and kissed his cheek. "Thank you." When she backed away, tears shimmered in her unusual blue-green eyes. He squeezed her hands. "You got this." The crowd was still applauding when Thomas descended the steps. He should probably find his table, but he was too hyped to sit. The speech earlier had been the best of his life, until tonight's. That had been the best speech he'd ever given, and the crowd's applause, which had been polite for the mayor, continued. Of course they were applauding to welcome Cassidy, but still his speech had elicited that support. Thomas paced into the darkness behind the tent, thankful for the stage's backdrop that hid him, and whispered fervent thanks to God. The night breeze off the lake cooled his skin, though his heart continued to race. Pockets of people were gathered on the grounds. Scents of grilling food and the sound of laughter floated from the beach, where a couple of kids still splashed in the dark waters, their parents watching from the shore. This was his town. These were his people. He'd never felt more a part of them. He'd never wanted to protect them more. And thanks to that speech, thanks to Josie, he might be able to do just that. A figure came around the stage. Josie. He barely registered Lake a few feet behind. Josie wore a silver dress with spaghetti straps, fabric resting on her upper arms in some new style. The dress fell over all her beautiful curves and skimmed the ground. The spiky silver heels were probably unwise after her sprained ankle, but she looked as at home in them as she did in the tennis shoes she wore for work. Most of her brown hair was pulled back, little wisps of it curling by her face. In her expression, he saw her joy, her pride in him. Everything else faded away as she neared. He opened his arms. He'd only meant to hug her. That was what he told himself. But he lowered his head, and she lifted hers, and their lips met. She tasted sweet, like heavenly lemonade. His hand slid against her cheeks into the hair at her nape, hair he'd wanted to touch for months. It was soft, sliding silkily through his fingers. The heat of her body warmed him through his tuxedo. Everything about her spoke to everything in him. He backed her closer to the stage's wall, shielding her from the view of passers-by, and deepened the kiss, holding her against him until his body threatened to explode with desire. And then he dove deeper. He could keep kissing Josie for the rest of his life, forever and ever and ever. And Josie responded, her hands sliding around his neck, pulling him closer. This wasn't just a kiss. It was a connection. It was magic. It was everything. Somewhere, firecrackers popped, and the spell was broken. No, not broken, but he realized where he was, what he was doing, who might be watching. Not that he cared, but she might. He slowed down, gently ending the kiss, then held her against his chest, knowing and not caring that she'd be able to hear the racing of his heart. He hoped she'd had half the reaction to that as he had, because that kiss had sealed it for him. He'd known he was attracted to Josie, known he liked her. But this was something new, something different, something perfect.
Chapter 21. Josie kept her ear pressed against Thomas's chest, listening to his racing heart. She'd come to find him, to tell him what a good job he'd done. She'd never expected. She couldn't even name it. It wasn't the kiss that had rocked her world off kilter. It was all of it. It was Thomas. This man. This handsome, talented, wonderful man. In the back of her mind, it registered that they were in public, though hidden in the shadow of the tent and the back of the stage. Lake was probably just a few feet away, scanning the park for threats. Donley was somewhere nearby. Somebody out there was plotting to use her to force her father's hand. Maybe plotting revenge. Revenge she absolutely deserved. But eclipsing all of those facts was the man who still held her close. The man who'd kissed her. The man she'd wanted to keep kissing forever. He chuckled, the sound low in his chest. If you ever want to do that again. He let the words trail, and she leaned away to see his face. She couldn't make out much in the darkness besides the whites of his dancing eyes. What? There's only one solution. He lowered his mouth to her ear, his words rumbling through her, sending tingles to her fingertips, her toes. You're going to have to ask me out. She shivered with pleasure and desire. Am I? He straightened. A promise is a promise, Ms. Smith. Maybe you shouldn't make promises you don't want to keep, Mr. Windham. Believe me, I've been telling myself that for weeks. She settled against his chest again. I'll take that under advisement. Meanwhile, we should go back before people start to talk. He tightened his hold on her. Let's just stay here until you work up your nerve. I'm in no hurry. She leaned away again. Now? I'd love to, but I have a prior engagement. Maybe next weekend? She smacked his shoulder. That wasn't what I meant. Okay? He pulled her close again. Thomas, we need to go inside. If that wasn't what you meant, then you'd better hurry up and ask. She'd never asked a man on a date, and despite the mind-blowing kiss they'd just shared, she didn't feel comfortable doing so now. What if what? She knew how he felt. As if reading her mind, Thomas whispered against her ear. I have my answer ready. Spoiler alert, it's yes. She swallowed her stupid, childish fear and leaned back to face him. Thomas, will you go on a date with me? She expected a yes, maybe a chuckle, or even a triumphant fist pump. She did not expect him to lift her off her feet and swing her in a circle. She laughed. Are you crazy? Put me down. He did, pulling her close once more. Anytime, anywhere. She wasn't sure about the when or the where yet, but she was pretty settled on the what. A quiet restaurant with no Shelley and no Bentley, no talk of danger or politics or any of it. Just the two of them, together. One more thing, he said. She felt very comfortable resting against his chest again. What's that? Will you let me off the hook on that promise? I'd like to be able to reciprocate. Consider the hook removed and tossed away. Good. He stepped back and held out his hand. May I escort you to the dinner, Miss Smith? She glanced at his hand, thought of Bentley. Bentley, who wanted her back. Bentley, whose heart would be crushed. She rubbed her lips together, shook her head. I need to talk to him. Thomas didn't ask who she meant. The joy leached from his face, but he nodded. Should we return from opposite sides of the tent? Are we pretending that… No, we can walk in together. I don't want to hurt him. She expected a smart comment from Thomas about her ex, but he only nodded. I understand. Why don't you return with Lake? I'm going to go for a quick walk. Try to cool off. I'll see you in a minute. Fair enough? But just when she was going to pull away, he took her hand. I expect Shelley to relinquish her seat for me. Josie giggled, sounding more like her friend than she usually allowed. Don't worry, I'm sure that's her plan. She swiveled and met Lake, who walked beside her silently around the stage and toward the table. She appreciated the woman's quiet disposition. The last thing she wanted at that moment was to chat, or to return to the party, but at least Thomas would be joining her soon. Until then, she'd try very hard not to let on what had happened, though Shelley would guess within seconds. Maybe Bentley, too, because a kiss that earth-shattering left signs. Josie could never unexperience feelings that Thomas's kiss had raised inside her. Feelings she'd never experienced, not with Bentley, not with any man. She wanted to explore those feelings. She wanted to explore a lot of things related to Thomas Windham.
Chapter 22. By the time Thomas stepped beneath the clear tent, Cassidy had finished her speech and the band had assembled. Dinners had been served, though Thomas had missed that portion of the evening, pacing nervously behind the stage. But Josie'd held on to a couple of dinner rolls and ensured one of the pieces of chocolate cake remained on the table for him. He was grateful for the sustenance. They'd enjoyed one dance, one perfect slow dance. Well, it would have been perfect if not for all the other people there. He'd caught more than one person taking their photo, including a reporter at the local paper. With Josie outshining every other woman at the party in that dress, he had no doubt the photo would end up in the newspaper. That she'd want to be with Thomas, that she'd kissed him. With all the good things, the 2 speeches, the applause, the feedback he'd gotten from townspeople, the highlight was Josie. He wanted to dance with her all night long, but he needed to spend the evening visiting with guests, getting to know them, letting them get to know him. He already knew a lot of them, but he'd never spoken to most of them about the future of Coventry. As he moved from table to table and talked with people over the music, he learned what locals wanted and hoped for, how they felt about the changing culture of their town. He filed away the ideas and worries and concerns to discuss with Josie later that week, hoping to address them in his campaign positions. He'd reached the farthest corner of the tent and was seated at a table with a group of older folks. One woman was giving him an earful not just on local politics, but about state and national concerns as well. Not that he didn't care, but as the mayor of a small central New Hampshire town, He wasn't exactly sure how he could solve the immigration issue. He caught sight of a certain gorgeous woman in a silver dress spinning on the dance floor with an irritating political strategist. They looked good together. They looked like they danced together a lot. And not just the spin in a slow circle dancing Thomas could manage, but real dancing with actual coordinated steps. Thomas did his very best not to watch, or glare, or growl under his breath. Josie could dance with Bentley. Of course she could. That didn't mean she loved him. That didn't mean she wanted him. When they waltzed by a second time, was Bentley moving closer to make sure Thomas saw? He noticed that neither of them looked particularly happy. Maybe Josie was telling him. Have to stop the influx of drugs at the border, the woman was saying. They're killing our kids. Thomas forced his gaze back to the octogenarian, who seemed to have more energy than he did. He was usually better about attending to the task at hand, not getting sidetracked. You're absolutely right about that. I'm not sure. But she didn't need his input. She cut him off and kept going. He nodded and hummed at all the right places. When another woman inserted herself into the conversation, Thomas shifted to speak with her. Ah, these were the Eatons, Tabby's parents. He'd known them as long as he could remember. You have my vote, Thomas, Mrs. Eaton said. And not only for all those reasons Lola just mentioned, you've always been a really good boy. Why you and my Tabby never got together, I'll never understand. Good thing we didn't, Thomas said. Fitz would be lost without her. Mrs. Eaton waved that off. You're right, of course. I wasn't sure about that one. Moving my baby all the way to Rhode Island? Her tone dripped with derision, as if she spoke of terrorists or biological warfare. But now that they're back, I guess he's all right. Thomas worked hard not to smile, considering she was dead serious. Fortunately, Tabby hadn't let her mother's opinions drive her, or she'd never have taken that 2-week vacation and met the love of her life. I'm supporting you because I trust you, Mrs. Eaton said. That Farley fellow, he's got a wife and a couple of kids, and a girlfriend on the side from what I hear. I know you'd never embarrass the town like that. You're never going to do anything to bring shame on us. Beside her, Mr. Eaton, the quieter of the two, nodded. If his own wife can't trust him, why should we? Exactly, Mrs. Eaton said. But you're an upstanding citizen. Thank you, ma'am. I try my best. Thomas had heard the rumors about Farley and his mistress as well. He and Josie had worked hard to paint Thomas in an entirely different light, as a man everybody could trust. Despite the fact that he didn't have a family, they'd used language to hint that Thomas was a family-oriented, godly man. She added, You need to get yourself married, though. Post haste. Thomas's gaze moved to where Josie and Bentley were exiting the floor, though the song still played. He couldn't help but grin. As he turned back to the older couple, he caught sight of Shelley and Rich chatting in the corner. Rich was in uniform tonight, acting as security for the party. Shelley didn't seem to mind that she was taking his attention off his duties. Thomas forced his attention back to Mrs. Eaton. What had she said? Oh, yeah. I'm working on securing the bride. Say a prayer for me, would you? I've got tough competition. The woman nodded solemnly, as if he'd asked her to solve world peace. I will be praying for the election and the girl. It was another 30 minutes before Thomas finished making the rounds, feeling buoyed by the promises for support and campaign contributions. It seemed all their work preparing for this event would pay off. Thomas had a real shot, at winning the election in November. Somebody had closed most of the sides on the tent to keep out the cool night air, which made the area feel smaller, cozier, and more secure. He headed to the tables he'd reserved in the front. They each sat 8, so he'd offered tickets to his employees and their spouses and a few of his friends. Garrett and Aspen had joined them, as had Braden and Carly. Most had wandered off, though. A few danced, others huddled around the bar talking. All in all, the fundraiser seemed a rousing success. As happy as he was for the youth center, which would surely get its game room, and as happy as he was about all the promises of support he'd received for his campaign, his big win had come in the form of a beautiful woman in his arms, and a kiss he'd never forget. He felt the big stupid smile on his face as he caught sight of Josie. She was seated at the table, alone. Lake stood a few feet behind her. Thomas glanced at the dance floor, where Bentley and Shelley were dancing. Huh. Could they call a truce long enough to last an entire song? Shelley was jabbering, and Bentley may have been listening, though he didn't wear even a hint of a smile. Interesting. Thomas slid into the chair beside Josie. I thought I'd never get back to you. Her lips tipped up, but there was something off about the expression. Hey, you. The words were drawn out, flirty, which wasn't like her at all. You all right? I'm so good. She leaned toward him, propping her elbow on the table. But it slipped off and she fell toward him. He caught her and settled her back in her chair. Josie, what's wrong? I've never felt better. Her words were slurred. We should kiss again. Let's kiss. He gripped her shoulders and set her back so he could look in her eyes. Have you been drinking? She waved toward a glass. Just Dr. Pepper. I must be drunk on you, Thomas. She giggled. I mean Thomas. He settled Josie back in her chair and sniffed the drink she'd indicated. Smelled like Dr. Pepper. He got Lake's attention and waved her over. The woman approached, the serious look she always wore morphing into concern. What's going on? Has Josie been drinking? I just told you. Josie's words were coming too slowly, very slurred. I only have pop. Lake's eyes narrowed to slits. I haven't seen her drink anything alcoholic. Thomas took Josie's shoulders again. Her eyes were closing. Open your eyes, sweetheart. She did. Her pupils were dilated. If she hadn't been drinking, then somebody drugged her. Rage, hot and sticky, poured over him. While he'd been glad-handing supporters, somebody had, what? Slipped something into her drink? Lake, Donnelly, Bentley, Shelley. None of them had protected her, but neither had Thomas. Get the others, he snapped. I'm taking her out of here. Don't move. Lake touched an earpiece. Donnelly, we've got a problem. Thomas drowned out the rest of the bodyguard's words. He crouched and slid a hand behind Josie's back. Okay, sweetheart. We're going for a walk, okay? She stood unsteady. You're so cute. You should wear tuxeses all the time. She tipped, swayed. Whoa! She met his eyes. Why is the room moving? I don't like it. He held her close to his side. Try to walk with me, okay? Are we gonna kiss? We just have to get out of the tent. There'll be plenty of time for kissing later. He hoped, he prayed, but who knew what had been slipped to her? He helped her take a step, but on the second she stumbled. He barely kept her from falling. Ooh! The sound came out too loud and people turned to look. Thomas allowed himself a quick scan of the area. He saw friends with concerned expressions, others with disapproving ones. A few were taking photos. Photos, of course, that was what this was about. The man had to be out there, somewhere, the one who'd worn the red cap. Any minute now, the senator would receive evidence of this moment in a text message. The exit was all the way at the opposite end. Thomas would take her out the other back exit, but he'd still have to cross in front of the stage, and the band playing there, and all the spectators. Try to stand up straight, sweetheart. Josie turned to him, eyes wide and blinking. I don't feel... Her legs gave out beneath her. Thomas scooped her into his arms, barely keeping her from landing on the grass. Forget the stage exit and the back exit. He locked eyes with Lake. Move the plastic aside. Thomas knew where the ambulance was. He needed to get her there now, because somebody'd slipped her something, a whole lot of something. It might wear off. It might kill her. Lake slid aside the heavy plastic wall nearest their table, then stepped out and scanned the park. One hand held out to stop him from following. Thomas wanted Josie to be safe, of course. He also wanted out of the now stifling air in the plastic tent. He tried not to notice the people who'd stopped to stare. The cameras lifted, the murmurs that rose above the bluesy music. He gazed down at Josie, whose playful expression had morphed into something else, frightened and drowsy. What's happening? She'd lost color. Her skin looked pasty and moist. Her eyes were wide, her pupils unnaturally large. I don't feel good. I know, sweetheart. Please don't let her throw up. He didn't care about the tux. He cared about the images, the videos that were sure to be circulating all over town by morning. Josie didn't deserve the judgment she'd surely receive after this. Donnelly appeared at Thomas's shoulder. Thomas said, Tell the police. Her glass. The Dr. Pepper. Have them test the contents. We might need to know what she was slipped. Already talked to him. They're on it. Thomas glanced back at the table, where Rich was snapping on plastic gloves. Good. Excellent. We're going out now, Donnelly said. You got her? At Thomas's nod, Donnelly stepped through the opening in the tent wall. Thomas slipped out into the chilly evening and jogged toward where the ambulance had been parked all day. Except the ambulance wasn't there. Maybe they'd been called away. Maybe they'd only planned to stay until most of the events were finished. In any event, Thomas was on his own. Behind him, Bentley shouted, "Hey, what happened?" Thomas didn't slow his pace, but he yelled, "Find the guy taking the photos. You've heard the description. You've seen him." Bentley fell in step beside him. "Let me take her. You go find the guy." "You have medical training I don't know about?" "I can take her to—" "She's been drugged, Bentley. Who knows with what? If her heart stops, you know how to do CPR? You know how to keep her alive?" Thomas glanced long enough to see the color blanch from the man's face. "Right. Okay. 6 feet, 180. He's got to be here. Blonde hair." Bentley turned back toward the party, but Thomas figured it was too late. The guide gotten the photos he needed. Now he was long gone. Shelley managed to catch up with them, her high heels dangling from her hand. "I'm staying with you. Maybe you could help look for—" "I'm staying with her," Shelley snapped. In his arms, Josie reached out toward the woman's voice. "My friend." But her voice faded. She passed out in his arms.
Chapter 23. The world was spinning, sliding, swaying. Images were flashing too fast to make any sense of them. Faces of people she loved, whose names she couldn't remember. They were talking to her, angry and worried, all furrowed brows and tight lips. What was wrong? Why were they so upset? If only Josie could pull herself out of her stupor, she'd help solve whatever problem had them so anxious. But she could barely open her eyes, and when she did, everything was off. Darkness, trees towering overhead, white walls and long corridors, bright lights, concerned voices discussing things she couldn't wrap her mind around, using words she didn't know. She was smart, though. She could help. "I went to Duke." In her head, the words were clear and sharp, but in her ears, they were slurred. "I know, sweetheart." It was a man's voice, deep and tender. "I'm smart." "Very smart." Gentle fingers brushed hair away from her face. "Stay with us, okay?" Oh my gosh, is she going to die? That voice was shrill, painful. "Josie, Josie, talk to me." "Shh." Josie was sure she'd made the quieting noise, but the shrill voice continued. "Oh my gosh, what if she dies? Who would do this? Do you think they'll catch him?" The deep voice said, "Let's try to stay calm. You're not helping." And the shrill one quieted. Thank God. God. There was a God. Where was he? "Are you here?" "I'm right here," the man said. "Me too," the shrill woman added. "We're not going anywhere." Not God, probably. Though God would probably have a voice like that man's, soothing and kind. He definitely wouldn't have a voice like the woman's. Were they in heaven? Where were they going? What was happening? But Josie couldn't seem to form the words to ask the questions. "Just keep breathing, sweetheart," the man said. "Just keep breathing, and everything will be all right." "Keep talking," Josie managed. "Your voice." "It makes me breathe," she thought. But she couldn't form the words, because someone laid a heavy, heavy, suffocating blanket on her. She wouldn't be able to keep breathing with it on top of her. She wouldn't be able to do what the deep voice asked. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry." Darkness. So much darkness. The world was black, but familiar. Familiar soft sheets beneath her. Familiar smells. A vanilla candle. Coffee. She was cold. Why so cold? Josie tried to kick her feet to feel for the blankets, but they didn't want to move. She struggled to sit up, but couldn't manage it. The comforter had to be here somewhere. But then something creaked. Something pushed down on top of her. She opened her eyes, and a figure leaned over her. "Are you with me?" he asked. It wasn't the deep voice from before. It wasn't any voice she'd heard. "I need to make sure you're awake," he said. Are you awake? She tried to nod, but couldn't make her head move. Say yes, I'm awake. This was another strange dream. She'd had them all night long, the visions, the spinning. She just wanted to go back to sleep until it stopped. She ignored the phantom voice. She could sleep without covers. She was warmer now. I need you to say it, Josie. Say, yes, I'm awake. All she wanted was to fall back asleep. She tried to tell the apparition that, but what came out was, sleep. Hands on her shoulders. How had she forgotten they were there? The fingers dug into her tender skin. Are you awake? Ouch! Maybe if she said what he asked, he'd go away. Yes, I'm awake. Good. But the man didn't loosen his grip. Can you hear me? How could she not hear him? His face was inches from hers. She could smell his breath, onions and garlic. It was nauseating. She tried to turn away from the scent, but the man's hands tightened again. How did she keep forgetting them? You can hear me? Yes. I have a message for your father. I'm going to say it, and you're going to repeat it. Okay? Okay. No matter where she goes. He paused, then said, repeat it. No matter where she goes. No matter what she does. Josie said, no matter what she does. We can get to her. A niggle of anxiety bubbled in her middle. This was the strangest dream. Say it, the man said. We can get to her. Vote yes. Josie repeated, vote yes. The pressure on her shoulders lessened, then disappeared altogether. A blanket was draped over her. Sweet dreams. Warm breath brushed across her cheek, that horrible onion scent filling her nostrils. Something bunched beneath her head. See you soon? Josie turned over and fell back into a deep, dreamless sleep.
Chapter 24. Thomas stepped into Josie's apartment and scanned the room. Bentley was in front of a laptop at the kitchen table. Lake, who'd let him in, sat in the chair she kept by the door. Shelley wasn't there. Donley, who usually slept during the days, had been on duty all night Saturday night, all day Sunday, and then all Sunday night. He must have gone to the hotel to sleep. Did she wake up? Not yet. Bentley stood and stretched. Neither of them had slept. They'd been at the ER until the wee hours. Josie's blood pressure had dropped low enough that the doctors hadn't wanted to release her. Thomas had stood beside her bed in the Plymouth hospital watching the monitor, knowing too well what all the numbers meant. They'd already been giving her fluids. If her pressure continued to drop. People died from Rohypnol overdoses. Thank God Josie hadn't been drinking. Alcohol increased the effects of the drug, and she'd been plenty affected by the laced Dr. Pepper. A single glass of wine, and the drug might have killed her. Maybe the attacker had given her too much. Maybe Josie was particularly susceptible. Or maybe this had been attempted murder. They'd assumed the enemy was trying to embroil Josie in a scandal, as they'd attempted when they'd had her arrested. But what if their plans had been darker this time? At her bedside in the hospital, Thomas had kept up a steady stream of prayers, trying to ignore Shelley's steady stream of fears and Bentley's incessant pacing, until finally, Josie's blood pressure inched up. The ER had kept her another couple of hours just to be sure, and released her at 4 a.m. They got her home and into bed. After shooing Thomas and Bentley out of the room, Shelley had helped her get changed. Then the three of them had sat, stunned and exhausted, in her living room, Shelley checking on her occasionally to make sure she was still breathing. Everything in Thomas had wanted to skip the stupid 4th of July parade, but Shelley wouldn't hear of it. We'll take care of her. We've all worked too hard on your campaign for you to blow it now. Shelley had been frantic at the hospital. That morning she'd stood over him in Josie's living room. This is the job, Thomas. If you want to be mayor, you need to show the town that you can be there, even when it's hard, even when your personal life is messy. If you can't, then you have no business running for office. She was right. Thomas had gone next door, scarfed down food, showered, and put on his game face. Thank God he'd gone to the parade. It seemed everybody in town had heard about what happened. Rumor was that Josie'd gotten drunk. Apparently, one of the servers remembered her drinking multiple whiskey and cokes, a fact the man had told both the police and a reporter. How someone could remember something that hadn't happened, Thomas had no idea. He was working on getting that guy's name. Maybe it was their tall, red-capped, photo-taking foe. At the parade, Thomas was able to set people right, telling everyone who asked that Josie had been drugged, that they'd gone to the hospital, and that the police were investigating. Some people believed him. Some people thought it sounded like an elaborate cover for a woman who obviously had a drinking problem. Funny how what people believed depended largely on which candidate they were supporting. When the parade was over, Thomas returned to Josie's. Now he moved deeper into the cool, quiet interior of her living room toward Bentley. "Where's Shelley?" "She went for a walk." "When was the last time she checked on Josie?" Bentley glanced at his phone. "An hour, probably." Thomas stepped toward the hallway. "I'll just make sure." "You're not going into her bedroom. I'm just going to check her pulse." "I can do that." Bentley started down the hallway, but Thomas grabbed his wrist. "I'm the paramedic." "Any idiot can check a pulse." But Thomas didn't let up his grip. He wasn't going to let Bentley go into Josie's bedroom. It was a matter of principle. Bentley looked at Thomas's hand on his arm slowly, then at Thomas. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" "I can think of a few things. Unlike you, I've been invited into Josie's bedroom before. Many times." Thomas gripped the man a little tighter. "You know the difference between you and me?" Bentley's eyes narrowed infinitesimally. "She kissed me," Thomas said. "Last night." Bentley yanked his arm out of Thomas's grip, stepping closer. Lake inserted herself between the two men. "I'll check on her. She's probably sleeping. I recommend you two do the same." Thomas barely heard the woman, glaring at the other man. "I'll take you both down if need be," Lake said. "And don't think I can't." Thomas's gaze flicked to the woman. She wasn't kidding. He stepped back, turned away. Since when was he a kiss-and-tell kind of guy? Why was he stooping to Bentley's level? Josie would not be impressed. "Check her pulse, make sure it's strong, and check her color. If she looks pale or pasty, or if she's sweating, come get me." He amended with, "Get us." Lake disappeared down the hall. Bentley paced away and settled at his laptop. Thomas plopped onto a chair. 2 minutes later, Lake returned. "She's fine. Pulse is strong, and her cheeks are pink." "Thank you," Thomas said. "When was the last time you slept?" "Donley will relieve me in a couple of hours. Until then, I'll be fine." "You need anything?" Lake shook her head. "Thanks for offering, though." Thomas rested his head against the back of the club chair and let his eyes close. There were so many questions that needed answers. Who was the man who'd told the police and the reporter that Josie had been drinking? Why hadn't any photos been sent to the senator this time? What good could come from drugging Josie? The truth about what happened would get out. Josie's reputation would be restored. Thomas had seen the photos in the newspaper of himself carrying her out of the tent the night before. Those pictures wouldn't hurt him. He'd been called a hero more than once that morning. Except for scaring them all to death? What had been the point? And how had someone gotten so close to Josie that they were able to slip rohypnol in her drink without anybody, Shelley, Bentley, the others at their table, and the 2 bodyguards noticing?